Poland, for instance, has closed its border. Poland
just closed its border with Belarus.
Poland, as a result, closing the border with Belarus.
How Poland's firm stance against China has halted vital rail traffic from Belarus. At the heart of this disruption lies China's substantial stake in Belarusian infrastructure, now caught in the crossfire.
Poland just slammed its border shut on Belarus. On the surface, it looks like a local security move, but in reality, it's draining billions of dollars out of China's pocket and tearing holes in Beijing's trillion-dollar Belt and Road Initiative. Sounds unbelievable and disconnected, right? Well, it's not. The single decision to shut one border is choking off China's most important trade routes in Europe. It's like putting a single Lego in front of a bullet train and watching global trade trip over it. Trains are stranded, cargo is piling up, and money is bleeding away by the day. A gateway China spent years building to connect itself with Europe is now collapsing, and it's all because of Poland. But here's the real twist. This blockade isn't just hurting China's bottom line, it's putting Beijing in an impossible position because behind Belarus stands Russia, China's so-called strategic partner. And thanks to Poland, that partnership is starting to look more like a trap than a deal. Let's start with why this whole issue matters and China's place in this European affair. Because you're probably wondering how a Polish border crossing ended up in Chinese budget meeting. You see, the Belt and Road Initiative is China's grand plan to connect its factories to global markets, especially Europe. Since 2013, Beijing has poured billions into highways, railways, and ports to bypass slow and expensive sea routes and build faster, more reliable land corridors. Europe has always been the big prize in this global plan. Just think of Germany, France, and the UK all buying Chinese phones, cars, and clothes. That kind of access to such a market would blow China's trade through the roof, and it has. However, to get there by land, goods have to pass through Poland. In 2024, over 90,000 train trips carried 8.7 million containers worth about $380 billion between China and Europe. Poland handled a huge chunk of that, about 25 million tons of cargo valued at $30 billion. That's nearly 7% of total trade value funneled through a single country. As for September this year, Polish rail hubs have moved large volumes as well, translating to around 700,000 containers. If Poland says no to those trains, like it has now, the whole system falls apart. The question is, why does it have so much power? Simply put, Poland's role is massive because it's a gateway. Think of it as a highway where every truck has to pass through a single toll booth. Except, instead of paying $5, Xi Jinping's whole future depends on this toll booth. It's like the front door to Europe for Chinese trains. Goods start in cities like Xinjiang, roll through Kazakhstan, Russia, Belarus, then hit Poland at this city. From there, they fan out across Europe. Now, sea shipping still carries most of the trade, since about 90% of the goods go by boat. But trains are faster, taking 12 to 15 days compared to 30 to 45 days for ships. They're also cheaper by 20% per container. That's why trains carry high-value stuff like electronics, car parts, and fresh foods, and even fresh fruit that needs to arrive fast. Poland processes over 90% of all these trains from China, making it a key link. If that link breaks, companies lose time, money, and trust in the whole BRI setup. So, with such an important role, why did Poland slam the door shut? There are a few reasons that we'll explore in this video, but it all starts with an immigration crisis that has been simmering for years and has really gotten out of control this year. You see, Belarus, Poland's neighbor to the east, has been sending thousands of people from places like Middle East, Africa, and Asia to Polish border. These aren't just people crossing on their own. Belarus is artificially making it happen. They fly migrants into Minsk on cheap flights, give them food, maps, and then point them towards Poland. Some even get tools to cut through border fences. Polish officials say over 20,000 people tried to cross in this manner in the first half of 2025. That represents a 40% jump from just last year. If you think there is some righteous reason for this, there is none. Belarus is simply doing this to cause trouble. It's trying to destabilize Poland as a way of hitting back at EU sanctions from 2020 that were imposed on Belarus and Lukashenko after he cracked down on protests and supported Russia's war in Ukraine. It's a calculated move to undermine Poland's border security and the European Union without necessarily starting a real fight that Russia and Belarus will lose. This tactic has a name: hybrid warfare. It means using tools like migration to weaken an enemy without actual battles. One look at the mess happening at the Polish border and you'll see that this works. Migrants camp in the cold forest in large numbers, sometimes without enough food or shelter. At the same time, Polish border guards deal with attacks as people throw rocks, shine lasers to blind them, or set fires to distract patrols. Belarus preys on the people's desperation for better life and weaponizes that against its neighbor, creating a tough situation for everyone. Humanitarian groups say migrants are suffering, with some stuck in no man's land between two countries. But Poland sees this pressure not as a humanitarian emergency, but as a hostile tactic and a risk to its stability. What's even more annoying to the Poles is that Belarus has mastered this hybrid warfare to the point where it controls the flow, adjusting the pressure based on political timing. Crossings slow during diplomatic visits, then surge again afterwards. But it would be a mistake to think Belarus acts alone. Now, behind this strategy is Russia and Putin, quietly orchestrating the disruption. Moscow wants Europe distracted and divided, especially while it wages war in Ukraine. By pushing migrants through Belarus, its puppet, it tests Poland's resilience and EU's unity. This testing and pushing the fold has been happening for a long time. When this migration crisis initially escalated back in 2021, Poland declared an emergency at the border. But that did not help much, and things kept getting worse. Then, just a few days ago, Russia escalated its hybrid war by sending 19 drones inside Polish airspace. This was an unprecedented attack on NATO. After years of being fed up, the government of Poland finally had enough. On September 9th, Prime Minister Donald Tusk said all border crossings with Belarus would close starting the night of September 11th. That meant no people, no trucks, no trains could pass. This main terminal, which handles billions in trade, went quiet overnight. To enforce this decree, Poland sent thousands of troops, built taller fences, dug trenches, and added cameras and drones. The goal was clear: stop the migrant push and protect the country. But unfortunately for China, that also meant stopping all cargo, including BRI trains. This is where China enters the equation as a victim of Russia and Belarus's action, the same two countries that China has been propping up for last 3 years. Those closed borders don't just block people, they block Belt and Road Initiative's main rail route into Europe. Chinese trains, packed with goods like laptops, car engines, and clothes, usually cross from Belarus into Poland without trouble. This terminal alone handled over 500 trains a month before closure. Since September 11th, that number has dropped to 0. Goods are stuck, piling up in Belarus, or rerouted to slower, pricier paths through Lithuania or back through Russia to other borders. Rerouting adds at least 5 days and up to 50% more cost per container. In the first week of the closure, at least 20 trains were delayed, holding cargoes worth over $200 million. If this lasts, the EU-China rail network, which ran 70,000 trips in 2024, could see half its volume vanish just like that. That monetary slowdown is a non-starter for China, whose economy is already struggling. They have spent over $100 billion on this rail line since 2013, betting on Europe as the big payoff. With it blocked, companies lose big. Big names like Huawei and BYD, which ship tech and cars, now pay extra for air freight or switch to slower sea routes. Sea shipping, already disrupted by attacks in the Red Sea, costs more and takes weeks longer. In 2024, rail saved 75% on emissions compared to trucks and ships, but That green edge is gone now, and it's all because of Vladimir Putin. As the delays increase, that's money and time slipping away that China cannot afford during this trade war. This is not just about lost revenue, it's about lost trust. Europe imports around $550 billion worth of Chinese goods each year. Rail accounts for only 5% of that volume, but it carries high-value cargoes like medical equipment, electronics, and car parts. In all likelihood, they will start sourcing this elsewhere, turning to North America or local suppliers. That shift hits China where it hurts. The Belt and Road Initiative was sold as fast and reliable alternative to sea shipping, but one border closure exposed a critical flaw and showed that it's not as solid as Xi Jinping promised. All this raises a deeper question. If one border can throw $1 trillion trade network off balance, how stable was the whole thing to begin with? The BRI was designed to link dozens of countries across continents in one smooth, unstoppable system, but Poland just proved it can be jammed with a single move. The world is watching, including countries in Central Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Many of them, already wary of China's influence, are now rethinking how much they want to rely on its routes. Poland did not just stop cargo, it exposed the weak spots in the entire setup. Right now, Chinese companies are feeling the fallout, with some reports of order drops up to 20% since the closure, which was only a week ago. The message from Europe is clear: trust matters, and China's overland trade route just lost credibility. This frustration of lost revenue is being transferred to Kremlin, with China getting fed up with Russia over this. Back in 2022, they called their partnership No Limits, promising to work together on trade and security. Russia was supposed to keep things stable in Eurasia so BRI trains could roll smoothly. Instead, Belarus, with Russia's backing, creates a migrant crisis that shuts everything down. That's a huge betrayal for Xi Jinping. Poland is really driving this betrayal in as its foreign minister met with China's foreign minister Wang Yi, laying out how Russia's games are hurting China's trade and economy. China thought Moscow would control its allies, but Belarus is running wild, and Russia is too focused or too bogged down in Ukraine to care. The result? China stuck with delays, losses, while Russia offers no fix. It's like building a highway only for your partner to blow up the bridge. Beijing's frustration is real and continuous. They invested billions in Russian rail lines, expecting clear paths to Europe. Joint projects like Moscow-Kazan high-speed rail were meant to speed up BRI shipments. But Russia's focus on war and chaos in Belarus ruins the whole thing. For now, China's state media is quiet, but Chinese exporters are vocal. Some are even calling Russia a bad bet. Chinese people need Europe's market, not Russia's drama. Polish officials have even revealed that Beijing privately asked Moscow to calm things down with no result. That's a rare sign of tension between two so-called perfect partners. Poland, meanwhile, looks like the tough guy here. It's a country of 38 million caught between Russia and the West, but it's standing tall. Closing the border wasn't just about migrants. It was a signal to Russia, Belarus, and even China that Poland will not be pushed around. They have spent years upgrading rail hubs like this one with EU money, making them some of the busiest in Europe. Now they're using that power to protect their land and disrupt global trade plan. At home, people back this action. Surveys show that 70% of Poles support the closure, worried about security. Makes it a key player. It shows how one nation can shift the balance in world of giants. Another interesting reality is that Europe's got Poland's back. The EU sent 100 million euros in 2025 to help with border defenses, like the new fences and tech. They have also kept sanctions tight on Belarus, banning flights and freezing bank accounts. NATO has stepped up too, running joint drills with Poland and sharing intelligence on Russian moves. What this does is it sends a uniform message across the board that this is not just Poland's fight, it's Europe's. That's why leaders in Germany and France are calling the migrant push a Russian plot, tying it to the war in Ukraine. That's why the support keeps rolling in, because Poland's closure protects the whole EU, keeping Russian chaos from spreading west. By holding the line, Poland strengthens ties with allies, ensuring it's not left alone against Russia's pressure. In light of all this, China now faces a brutal choice: stay loyal to Russia and bleed billions in European trade, or start pulling back to salvage the Belt and Road Initiative. Europe accounts for 20% of China's exports, worth $550 billion a year. Even a small disruption stings badly. If Poland's border closure drags on, it would cost China $10 billion annually, on top of the $100 billion it has already sunk in rail infrastructure. Some Chinese companies are already shifting gears, rerouting goods by sea despite longer transit times and higher costs. Others are exploring alternative land corridors to Turkey or Central Asia. But those options require years of construction and billions more in investment. For now, China is stuck. And longer the crisis stretches, the harder it becomes to justify the no-limit partnership with Russia. What began as a strategic alliance against the West is starting to look like a liability to many in China. It's because of this that Beijing has started to make moves on the down low, if you know what I mean. Recently, Turkish President Erdogan met with Chinese President Xi Jinping to talk about rail links through Istanbul, bypassing Russia entirely. They're also boosting ties with Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, hoping to build a southern corridor that avoids Belarus altogether. These are not loud announcements, as China doesn't like to air its laundry, but they are a show. Even at the UN, China has been less vocal about backing Russia, like when they stayed neutral on a Ukrainian vote recently. That's a small sign, but it matters. Don't get me wrong, China is not throwing Russia out overnight. After all, Russia is still a big partner, with trade hitting $240 billion last year. But China is not happy about being dragged into Moscow's mess. This Polish crisis is forcing them to rethink who they trust and who they depend on. What's more, the Poland shutdown is more than a border issue. It's a stress test for the entire Belt and Road Initiative. China built this vast network to connect 150 countries with $8 trillion in trade riding on its success. But one closure in Eastern Europe has exposed how vulnerable the system really is. The world is paying attention. In South Asia, India has blocked key BRI road links over border disputes, cutting trade with China by 15% in 2024. In Africa, protests have stalled Chinese port projects in Kenya, causing $2 billion in delay. Even Pakistan, one of Beijing's closest BRI partners, faces persistent security threats at Gwadar port, leaving ships ideal and investments stranded. These disruptions are not isolated, they are accumulating. In 2025 alone, more than 20 countries have renegotiated BRI loans, struggling to repay what they owe. Investors are growing wary. Partners are reconsidering, rivals are watching.
YouTube just dropped a mind-boggling announcement. It is paying creators $64 million per day. Why? Well, because YouTube doesn't have enough creators. That is why you see videos on your homepage that have less than 1,000 views, like this one right here. Now, of course, this doesn't mean that everyone should start a channel. But if you have ever wondered about starting a YouTube channel or a faceless channel, now is a perfect time. YouTube is paying creators millions of dollars every single day, and it's pushing newer and smaller channels now more than ever. But I'm sure you have many questions on how to start and grow a channel. We get questions in our email all the time from some of you guys. That's why we decided to put all our YouTube advice into one YouTube video for completely free. So if you're someone interested in starting your own channel, you can watch that video here on YouTube by clicking the link in the description or card on your screen.
Poland's move is a wake-up call. If one mid-sized country can freeze trains, the entire BRI network begins to look less like a global artery and more like a fragile web. In event of conflict or economic blackmail, other countries are starting to get ideas, if you know what I mean. At this point, you're probably thinking, if migration mess is sorted out, Russia and China can go back to being allies and all is well. Well, if that's your thinking, you're wrong. The biggest problem for China isn't just this border mess. It's that Russia has been causing troubles for years. The migrant crisis at Poland's edge isn't a one-time event. It's the latest in a long string of headaches Moscow has handed Beijing. There's a pattern of trouble that is forcing China to rethink its entire global game plan. This September alone, several Russian provocations against Poland have occurred. It started with nearly 24 Russian drones crossing into Polish airspace, many via Belarus. NATO jets scrambled to fix this mess, and at least 3 were shot down. The timing was not random. It was all suspicious. Just days later, Russia launched its Zapad 2025 military drills, deploying 10,000 troops across Belarus and Western Russia. The exercises simulated conventional and nuclear warfare, including rollout of Orishnik missile system. For China, it was a nightmare. Its Belt and Road trains were already getting caught up in the migrant crisis at the Poland-Belarus border. Now with drones flying from sky and missiles rolling through Belarus, a trade headache had turned into a full-blown security crisis. Beijing said little, but its silence spoke volumes. Every drone, every drill made China look like it was chained to a partner it could not control, and Europe was watching. Then we also have the cyber attacks. Hackers linked to Russia have been coming at Poland hard, and the Deputy Minister for Digital Affairs confirmed that the Polish nation was facing between 20 to 50 attempts to damage critical infrastructure daily. That's every single day. They targeted hospitals, city services, and even railway systems that carry BRI cargo. These hits are part of a growing pattern of pressure that has intensified throughout the year. For China, this is not just annoying, it feels like betrayal. Beijing had spent years and billions building trust with Europe through trade deals and rail lines, only for Russia to undermine it with reckless stunts. What's worse, the trouble doesn't just stop at Poland's borders. In Central Asia, Russia has been quietly working against China's BRI plans. This region is critical for Beijing. Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan handle millions of tons of cargo headed to Europe. In 2024, Kazakhstan alone moved 1.2 million tons of BRI goods, earning $500 million in transit fees. But Russia has been stirring the pot. It promotes its own group, the CSTO, as a way to keep control over Central Asia security. At the same time, it blocks Chinese projects. In Kazakhstan, protests against Chinese rail expansion erupted, with Russian media amplifying anti-China sentiment. Permits for new tracks are stuck, and local officials are dragging their feet. What should be a smooth trade path for China is now a tangle of delays and cost, all with Russia's fingerprint on it. The Arctic is another sore spot. China saw the Northern Sea Route, a shipping path along Russia's Arctic coast, as a future gold mine. It could cut Europe-Asia shipping time by 10 days compared to the Southern Sea Route. Since 2018, China has poured billions of dollars into Arctic ports, icebreakers, and joint deals with Russia to make it work. But this year, Moscow began shutting China out. It cited vague security concerns to block Chinese ships from key routes, leaving vessels stuck. That's hundreds of thousands of tons of cargo delayed, worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Now China's investment is sitting idle, frozen not by ice, but by Russian politics. For Beijing, it's a clear signal that Russia is more interested in control than cooperation. Africa is another region where Russia is causing headaches for Xi Jinping. Over the past 2 decades, Chinese companies have invested heavily in infrastructure across the continent, building roads, ports, railways, and energy projects through bilateral deals and Belt and Road partnerships. Countries like Mali and Burkina Faso have seen major Chinese-backed developments, especially in mining and transport. But Russia's growing footprint is complicating that picture. Through military ties and presence of mercenary groups like Wagner, Moscow has injected volatility into regions where Chinese firms operate. While direct clashes between Russian forces and Chinese companies have not been confirmed yet, the instability is real. Local governments are increasingly caught between China's economic influence and Russia's security entanglements. This tension is starting to affect China's reputation. Beijing has long positioned itself as a reliable, apolitical partner in Africa. But as Russian-backed disruptions mount, that image is under strain. Investors are watching closely, and some projects are slowing down, not because of China's missteps, but because the ground beneath them is shifting. Then there is the obvious, Ukraine, the biggest thorn in China's side. When Russia illegally invaded in 2022, China chose pro-Russia neutrality, hoping to keep trade flowing with both Europe and Russia. But that pro-Russia neutrality is backfiring. Europe now sees China as tied to Russia's war. EU sanctions this year hit 10% of BRI projects, costing Xi Jinping $2 billion in delays. Even public opinion in Europe is souring. Polls show that 60% of Germans want less Chinese trade, up from 40% just a year ago. On top of that, investment is slowing too. European funding for BRI projects dropped 15% this year. China has spent decades building an image as a practical, business-focused power, but Russia's war is making it look like a partner in crime. For China, the future looks difficult. The Belt and Road Initiative is supposed to run for decades, but Poland's closure shows how weak it is right now. Beijing is trying to adapt, investing in new routes and ports, but nothing is as fast or cost-effective as Poland Corridor. Sea routes like through Greece's Piraeus port are expanding with 5.5 million containers moved in 2025 already, but they cannot match rail speed for high-value goods. Air freight is an option, but it is too expensive for most companies, costing up to $6 per kilogram. That's more than $2 per pound. China is also facing pressure from Europe, where leaders are pushing to reduce dependence on Chinese exports. The EU's new trade rules set to take effect in 2026 could add tariffs on 10% of BRI goods, costing China another $5 billion annually. Poland has triggered a chain reaction that is proving hard to contain. The truth is that the China-Russia relationship may never recover from this. Moscow's war in Ukraine and Belarus's migrant push have shown Beijing that Russia is more of a burden than a benefit. China needs Europe's markets. That's unquestionable. 20% of its exports go there, and it cannot afford to be tied to a partner that invites chaos and sanctions. So, while energy trade will likely continue, China is expected to pull back from major joint ventures like rail hubs. This year, a Chinese think tank recommended focusing on independent routes to Europe, a polite way of saying Russia is no longer reliable. If Poland's closure stretches into 2026, China will likely lean harder on countries like Turkey, Kazakhstan, building a network that bypasses Putin's Moscow. While all that is happening, another fact has solidified. Poland's new role is here to stay. It's no longer just a border guard. It's a global influencer, not a YouTube influencer. By controlling the flow of BRI goods, Poland is shaping trade and politics in ways few predicted. Its rail hubs, backed by EU funding, give it leverage over superpowers. Its military, now among NATO's strongest, make it a key ally. The United States and the EU are investing heavily in Poland's future, with 10 billion euros in new trade deal expected by 2027. Poland is showing the world that one country, no matter its size, can change the game by standing firm. In the end, Poland's border closure has done more than stop trains. It has exposed the limits of BRI, forced China to reconsider its alliance with Russia, and turned a small nation into a global force. One country, one decision, one border, and world's trade map is shifting. In great game of trade and power, the quiet border is proving louder than the battlefield.